Welcome back to the Dignity. I'm your host, Madeleine Jones. I'm here with David Witt. The Dignity is all about finding the tea in our daily lives, culture, politics, whatever.
Let's get into the tea.
Let's get into the tea. So, today, I'm going to be talking about my good friend Arthur Brooks. He doesn't know we're friends yet, but we are. He wrote this book called Love Your Enemies, and he's basically talking about the culture of contempt in here. Now, I think we're all fairly familiar with contempt. Contempt is when we think we're above someone or someone else thinks they're above us, basically. Right. So we want to exclude people rather than include them. So this is what he has to say about contempt. We may not be engaging in daily violence against each other, but we can't make progress as a society when both sides believe that they're motivated by love while the other side is motivated by hate. Now, this phenomenon is called the motive attribution asymmetry. It's basically assuming that your ideology is based in love and the other's is based in hate. Now, this is something that I have been seeing a lot recently on social media, and I have also indulged in it. I remember last week's episode, I was like swinging into the contemptuous lane. It's very obvious I'm pretty liberal, and when I see these kind of conservative Trump policies, I'm like, oh, I don't like it. I found a couple of examples of this on social media, and it was not hard to find, as I'm sure it's not hard to find on your own feeds.
Yeah, contempt everywhere.
This was probably one that really surprised me, especially after working on the Dignity Index. Looks like the next civil war will be between Americans and maggots, which is basically them saying MAGA people, maggots. That, like, I'm so grateful I have the index, because when I read that, it's like when we call the other side subhuman, which literally calling someone a maggot is almost a one at least.
Yeah, and calling for violence.
Yeah. So, I don't know, that was like, it's very clever, I will say.
Yeah.
That's probably the best name calling I've heard in a while from the left, but I don't think it's okay to call people maggots.
Yeah. Definitely low on the index.
Yeah. And also, like, rude. So, it's just so undignified. Let me see, what's this one? It's about superiority. All these people feel superior. That's why it's easy to hand wave. Rules don't apply to people who are superior, only to the little people. That's why they end up being compared to Nazis, because the Nazis thought they were superior too.
Yeah, this us or them, us versus them. I really like the Arthur Brooks quote of, we're showing love when we do something and you're showing hate when you do something. And yeah, both sides do that. I mean, I have definitely fallen into that as well. And reminds me of, I was just talking to a friend who, how one of the recent policies impact personal lives, and a friend of mine might lose funding for their program. I mean, it's frozen right now with these freezes, with the possibility of being cut. And it's, real people, real lives, and in this specific case, thousands of children in Utah who are going to be impacted by it. And so this can be scary and frustrating, and make people mad. And when we're hurting and feeling like that, it's easy to slip into this culture of contempt and see that what they're doing is harming us, and what we want to do is helping people. But half of the people who voted for Donald Trump. And so there's, obviously a lot of people who think that's the solution. Um, and and when we blame somebody else when something feels personal, we can easily dip into this culture of contempt.
Well, and I think like contempt doesn't come out of nowhere or just because of kicks and giggles usually.
Yeah,
I think it's typically it's a very natural response, but if nothing's wrong, you usually don't respond with contempt, right? If you haven't had some sort of harm, then you're not going to be contemptuous.
right.
I think the culture of contempt comes from very real dignity violations that you can see on social media, have probably happened in real life. Um, I mean,
Right.
social media is real life at this point, but I think that a lot of times we justify the contempt we're using and say, look, it's a culture of contempt, but I'm like fighting for till the death here, right? Like, I need a win because it's basically these people are bad and my people are good. I'm operating based on love and they're operating based on hate. So there's no room for any overlap. When in
Right.
reality, I would say the majority of Americans are like, I want my kids to have a better life than I do. I want things to be well economically. I would like affordable healthcare. I have never
Yeah.
seen someone be like, expensive
Yeah.
healthcare.
Expensive healthcare, expensive housing, expensive gas. We want all of that.
We
No,
want
like,
it to be unaffordable. The American dream unaffordable. Like
right.
no one's campaigning on that.
Yeah.
But it's funny because as it filters through, it can kind of look like that. One of the things that Arthur also mentions in this book is that social media has a way of isolating the contempt we like. So it's like we're getting this like really concentrated meth basically because contempt is very addicting. It feels very validating.
Yeah.
And so these algorithms are pushing our own beliefs and we're just entering this feedback loop echo chamber where it feels like how could anyone else think anything different? Look at all this stuff I'm seeing. And that's I don't want to just conclude with that being a huge problem, but it is.
Yeah, I know something else he mentions in that book is being addicted to this culture of contempt and the people we follow, the things we read, feeds into this bias that we have. Um, or, yeah, we like clicking on things that reinforce our ideas. And so we just keep going back to these contemptuous posts instead of maybe seeing that there are good ideas and opinions outside of the people we originally follow. That doesn't mean that I'm a loyalist to somebody else now, but maybe they have a few good ideas and I can accept those good ideas without accepting the whole uh, political ideology that that person carries.
Exactly. I mean, and I really hate when everything turns into like a bash social media and the algorithms. So the thing about the algorithms is it's really what the people are engaging with,
It's
right?
built brick by brick.
Yeah, I have built my algorithm
Yep.
to cater what I want.
Yeah.
And somehow I end up with people calling, Trump supporters maggots. And it's
Yeah.
like we are so much more a part of this culture than we ever think we are. Because I think we're always like, oh, these people have really got to figure it out. And in reality, the only thing you have control over is your own behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, one of my favorite things has been the 1984 comparisons. And one of the best things about Contempt is it's like so unoriginal. And if it is original, I give it credit because I'm like, ooh, that's clever. I can't help
Yeah.
myself. But with the 1984, I feel like both the left and the right are now like, this is the world we live in. You both are Big Brother.
Yeah, exactly. And um, really quick before that, I just wanted to say I realize like our own biases that we have, um, and maybe the impacts that are happening right now in January 2025. But it would be interesting if people know people who were impacted by previous um, administrations and how they felt like their dignity was violated and how they responded. I think that'd be a good conversation for anybody who is listening and wants to engage, because it's not just the Trump administration or just the Biden administration that has impacted people negatively. And so I think it'd be good to open up that door for a conversation and talk about those dignity violations where people do feel scared or frustrated or hurt. That, yeah, that this whoever's in charge is this big brother, or this big government. And so yeah, the George Orwell's 1984 book, this dystopian novel that talks about uh, government control, controlling information, history, uh, propaganda, independent thinking.
One of the things I remember is he had like an ulcer on his calf that wouldn't go away. Like that was a huge part of the book I remember.
Yeah,
I
good,
obviously
good,
I absorbed the
good,
important
good,
stuff.
good part. But back to what you were saying of like the left sees the right as this Orwellian uh, structure, and the right sees the left as this Orwellian structure. And you know, on the left, there's a lot of government overreach with right wing policies, um, for voting restrictions or disinformation on restricting education, um, or personal freedoms such as book bans or abortions or limiting rights of minorities or LGBTQ plus communities. And on the right, the censorship on social media bans and cancel culture, and trying to monitor speech and what people are saying, and media control, and what type of media is true media, and accepting that, and um, government overreach with COVID-19 and all of those policies. And so there's this, both sides pointing the finger at each other, saying, we love our country. We are putting forth policies that are coming from a place of love, and you are restricting our freedoms. You hate America. You're destroying America. Where, like you said, most people want similar things of, the basic elements of what makes America America.
Definitely. Yeah, I think one of the things about this is we become so convinced that if our guy gets in office, things will be fixed. And so you just gotta wait, for me, you gotta wait for the Democrats to take control. And suddenly everything's gonna be great. But I think one of the fallacies in that is that no matter what, when you have this sort of ping pong with politicians, where someone has control and so they enact all these policies, and then the other party gets control and then they enact all these policies. And really, what happens is the people at the bottom who have the least amount of power
Right.
are the ones who suffer. And that's kind of the hard thing is I do feel like the culture of contempt affects everyone, regardless of your class or your income, your race, your gender, whatever.
For sure.
But when we talk about how we need to improve the economy so people can have a better life, or and I feel like both sides say that, and we're like, we're going to get rid of these people who are the problem so that we can all have a better life. These policymakers are horrible. It just means that the guy at the bottom is usually the one who suffers the most, which is the real bummer, because as someone who feels like I have used contempt as a reason to feel like I'm like protecting the disadvantaged,
Yeah.
it's actually hurting them. And so it's when we talk about the culture of contempt and using more dignity, a lot of our feedback is like, great, that's not going to solve any issues. There's real problems. Thank you. Grow up. Let's get into the real world. And the
Yeah.
thing that we want to say is that we're not saying like, no contempt ever, you evil person, only dignity. What we're saying is examine your ratio.
Yeah.
How much dignity are you using to how much contempt? And is that contempt actually worth it? Because contempt is very energizing, it can be uniting, is a way to say, hey, there's an issue. And I will say there is a difference between contempt and anger, but I'm going to mesh the two a little bit here. Because anger is a sign that something is wrong and something needs to be changed. The
Yeah.
thing about anger, though, is that I can be angry in a relationship and want to be closer with someone, and the anger doesn't affect the connection I have with a person. Contempt would, because contempt is like the resignation, I'm done with you and I'm better than you.
Yeah.
And right now, we're in such a contempt culture where we feel that way about people who want the same things as us instead of, I think, fighting for what we believe in or explaining what we believe in. I'm trying not to use such like war term words for
Yeah.
politics.
Fighting.
We're
War.
gonna fight. It's a battleground of good
Yeah.
ideas, and I'm like, ah,
Yeah.
contributing here. But I think I don't know. I don't know what to say anyway.
Yeah. And also just removing people from office, once, President Trump is out of office, once President Biden is out of office, things are going to get better. But if we have this culture of contempt, things really aren't going to get better by just removing the president. A lot of internal, within ourselves and within our communities and neighborhoods and state, um, and country, all of those conversations need to be happening, and not just removing the person at the top to really shift this culture of contempt. And yeah, I think also what you were saying of like, um, we have a lot of shared values and interests, and there are also things that we don't agree on, and that people don't agree on and have different values and different morals. And we can have those, but like you said, with that disgust that comes with contempt, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have conflict, but when you have disgust for somebody else,
For like a human disgusts you.
yeah, like we are better off without you. Your ideas aren't welcome at the table, then this culture of contempt and these issues aren't going to get resolved.
Definitely. I
But
think what I would say is that one of the things to examine within your own social media feed or within your own social circles is how often are you challenged on your beliefs?
yeah,
And I'm not saying like prove that you're as liberal as you can, because those are my circles. But I mean, like, how often do you go, oh, maybe I was wrong about something? Or maybe, like, for me, it's like, oh, maybe Trump isn't the monster I thought he is, which
sure,
is hard. It's like hard for me to say that, but I get to that point where I'm like, this monster. And then I'm like, okay, wait a second. I need to like re-examine how I'm thinking about this, because you can't just label everything someone does or who someone is as a monster and then be blindsided when like he wins the majority vote.
yeah. And you can move up and down, like people move up and down the scale. Like maybe something he does, is really contemptuous, and there are things that he does and everybody does that is more unifying and calls for this better conversation, to find these shared values.
Mm-hmm. I think in this culture of contempt, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anger. But I think what we need right now is acknowledgement. And that goes for people who are being hurt by these policies right now, people who've been hurt by policies from both Democratic and
Yeah,
conservative administrations. But I also think that we need to acknowledge within our personal lives how our contempt and our anger has hurt other people. Because that's something that I think we tend to ignore because we want to look at the people who are in power, but we have the most power of our own lives. I believe that. American dream here. I'm gonna stick to that. Um and I think it's so important to acknowledge what is hurting you, like your friend who is has that funding freeze for
yeah,
their job. Like that's a nightmare.
yeah,
Um But I know I have probably liked or shared things on my social media where if someone who had an opposing viewpoint saw it, it may have like actually hurt their feelings or been like, okay, this is a little bit isolating. And I probably didn't think twice about it.
Yeah. Or shamed them.
Yeah, or I was like, good, you should feel bad about that, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think those are the moments where I think that will heal the divides and bring us closer together. And when I say closer together in unity, I'm not saying we have to agree on everything, but I believe the unity is kind of this recognition of dignity while also disagreeing because we're in a representative government. And it's so much better to have a representation of multiple different political beliefs
Yeah.
than just one. Because if you think your one party is going to solve everything, someone will suffer.
Yeah, exactly. And if people do want to shame you for doing something, if that's the approach you want to go for it. If you're working on solving problems, shaming somebody into believing what you believe is not going to get them to what you believe.
Yeah, I'm going to hate you so much that you change your mind.
Right.
Let me just.
And that's, that was one. I think I really liked my friend's response of reaching out to me and some of my other friends like, will you please write your legislators and tell them why this impacts something you care about or people you care about. And that is how we can change things, of having those conversations, and that dialogue. I know sometimes it can feel hard or like it's just going into the wind when we write our representatives. But if you talk to enough people and enough people also write similar concerns, there is that possibility that they're going to change their idea on how they vote on something, or at least you can build some rapport with your representative, and they see you as a person and they hear you as a person instead of just one out of 100,000 or 500,000 constituents that they're over.
Yeah. One of the things about contempt is it's really dividing us. And I think 1 in 3 Americans have um, stopped a relationship.
Yeah, broken off
Broken off,
a,
thank
a
you. Broken off,
relationship.
I'm like, they have ceased their relationship.
Severed.
They have broken off their relationship with a close family member or friend because of politics.
Yeah.
And one of the things about these administration shifts and how people are affected is that means that every connection you would have had to someone who was affected by a policy that you didn't know is gone. So you're probably 1 or 2 people away from someone being affected.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean you have to justify why the policy is right or why it's still wrong. It just means that you know more about what's going on in your community and how these things are affected. And you're probably going to be challenged on your own beliefs a lot more, which I think we should be.
Yeah. And maybe that's the challenge for this week, of take an internal reflection of how we're contributing to this culture of contempt, on what we're liking or what we're sharing or what we're listening to, what we're talking about with our echo chamber of friends, and just notice how much contempt we consume and how much contempt we're sharing. And like you said, with the ratio, is the ratio of dignity and contempt similar? Is one way higher than the other? And
One
just
thing on the
notice it.
ratio, John Gottman, and this is in relationships, but he also mentioned this for political disagreements in this Arthur Brooks book. Arthur Brooks book. Oh, I've never said that one before. He says a 5-to-1 ratio. So 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative. So start thinking about that with people who you have political disagreements with. Think about it with people who you agree with. How often are you talking about like the other side, whether it be gossip or it could be politics?
Yeah.
Are you doing a 5-to-1 ratio of something positive to criticism? For me, I think that will be my feed. Like this is kind of my challenge for myself, is like on my feed, how much of it is going to be positive versus negative? Because I think that when you're overwhelmed with that, it really affects you mentally.
Same.
So there's your goalpost.
Let us know how it goes.
Yeah, where do you think the contempt just proliferates? Where have you seen it? Where do you think you're the most affected by it? Let us know in the comments down below. Mine's the tickety tockety. We all know. That's it for the dignity. Catch y'all next week.
Have a good week. See ya.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. How was that?